her eyes, as if she had already accepted that her chance to play had passed. It was a moment of quiet regret, not just about the performance but also about the idea that her talents might never be shared with the world. Despite her many years of service to the convent, Sister Agnes had always kept her music to herself. It was her one private joy, something that was purely for her and her connection to the divine. But now, she felt as if even that had been taken away. The younger nun hesitated but then made up her mind. She couldn't let this opportunity slip away. She quietly approached Sister Agnes, speaking in soft tones so no one else could hear. "Sister," she said, "there is still time. The guests are waiting and they need something to lift their spirits. Please, just a few minutes. No one will mind." Sister Agnes looked at her, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. She had already agreed to stay in the background, helping with the event in whatever way she could. She had accepted the Mother Superior's decision, telling herself that her place was not to be in the spotlight. But the younger nun's pleading was hard to ignore. Sister Agnes thought of the music that had always brought her peace, the piano that had been her companion in the quiet hours. For a moment, she considered walkie Sister Agnes had always lived a quiet life. She was a nun at a small convent tucked away in a peaceful corner of the countryside, surrounded by tall trees and green fields. The convent was a place where the world seemed to stand still. The sisters woke up early every morning for prayer, spent their days helping others, and kept to themselves in the stillness of their routine. There was comfort in the daily rituals, a kind of peacefulness that made everything feel right in the world. As a young woman, Sister Agnes had chosen the path of faith, dedicating her life to serving God and others. She had always been drawn to the idea of helping people in need, finding joy in the simple act of giving. Over the years, she had grown into her role, becoming known for her kind heart, gentle nature, and the soft smile that always seemed to be on her face. She rarely spoke about herself, always putting the needs of others first. But there was one thing that Sister Agnes kept close to her heart: her love for music. Since she was a little girl, she had been enchanted by the sound of the piano. Her family had not been wealthy, but her parents had recognized her natural talent and made sure she had music lessons. Sister Agnes remembered the way the piano keys felt beneath her fingers, how she could lose herself in the music, letting the notes carry her away. But when she entered the convent, she knew that her love for music would have to be put aside. It was not something that had a place in her new life. Music, she thought, might distract from the sacred work she had chosen to do. But even in the silence of the convent, the pull of music never quite left her. Whenever she had a quiet moment, she would sneak into the small chapel where an old, forgotten piano sat in the corner, gathering dust. There she would sit and play, her fingers moving slowly over the keys, the soft melody filling the empty room. It was a private joy, a secret that only she knew about, and it gave her a sense of peace that words could never express. Playing the piano was like prayer to her, a way to connect with something deeper inside herself, something beyond the daily chores and responsibilities. The other nuns knew of her love for music, though they rarely spoke of it. Sister Agnes was content with her quiet sessions at the piano, knowing that her music was something private, something just for her. It was not about performing for others or showing off her skill. It was simply a way to express her soul, a way to feel alive in a world that sometimes felt too quiet. But as time passed, the convent faced challenges. The building, though beautiful, was old and in need of repairs. The sisters did their best to care for it, but funds were tight and it became clear that they needed help. It was decided that the convent would host a fundraising gala to raise money for the repairs and to support their charitable work. It was a big event, and many of the local community members were invited. The nuns worked hard preparing for the event, organizing everything from the decorations to the food to the entertainment. Sister Agnes, who had always been content in the background, was approached by one of the younger nuns who had heard about her piano playing. The younger nun, eager to make the event special, asked Sister Agnes if she would play the piano during the gala. It was a bold request, one that surprised Sister Agnes. The thought of playing in front of so many people made her nervous, but she knew this might be her chance to share a part of herself with others, something she had always kept hidden. She agreed, though with some hesitation. After all, this wasn't just any performance, it was a fundraising event, a chance to make a real difference for the convent. Sister Agnes knew that if her music could bring joy to the guests, it might also inspire them to give generously. But she also understood the pressure that came with it. She wasn't just playing for herself now. She was playing for the future of the place she had called home for so many years. However, when the night of the gala arrived, things did not go as she had hoped. The Mother Superior, the leader of the convent, was a strict woman who took her duties very seriously. She had always been conservative in her approach to the convent's activities, believing that a nun's place was to serve in quiet humility, not to seek attention or recognition. When she heard that Sister Agnes was planning to play at the gala, she was not pleased. The Mother Superior felt that it would not be proper for Sister Agnes to perform in such a public way. She argued that the focus of the evening should remain on the convent's mission and the charity it was raising money for, not on an individual performance. In her mind, it wasn't appropriate for a nun to be the center of attention, even if it was for a good cause. The idea of a public performance seemed at odds with the convent's values of humility and service. Sister Agnes was deeply disappointed by the Mother Superior's decision. She had hoped that her music could be a way to contribute to the event, to give something of herself to the community. But she understood the Mother Superior's reasoning. After all, Sister Agnes had always believed in the importance of following the rules and respecting the traditions of the convent. She was not one to challenge authority, especially not the Mother Superior who had guided her and the other nuns for many years. So, with a heavy heart, Sister Agnes accepted the decision. She decided that she would contribute to the event in other ways. She helped with the preparations, serving food, greeting guests, and doing whatever was needed. As the evening went on, Sister Agnes stayed in the background quietly watching the event unfold. But deep inside she longed for the chance to play, even just for a few moments. As the night progressed, the gala continued, but it seemed as though something was missing. The guests were enjoying themselves, but there was a noticeable lull in the energy. The entertainment had come to an end, and there was a brief pause in the evening's activities. That was when the younger nun who had first asked Sister Agnes to play approached her once again. She could see the disappointment in Sister Agnes's eyes and knew that she had to do something. "Please," the younger nun whispered. "Just for a moment. The guests are waiting and your music will lift their spirits. No one will know." Sister Agnes hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. It felt like a risk, a defiance of the Mother Superior's wishes. But as she looked around the room, she saw the guests laughing and talking, oblivious to the tension. She thought of the convent, of the people they helped, and of the joy that music had brought her over the years. Perhaps just this once it would be okay. With a deep breath, Sister Agnes stood up and walked toward the piano. The sound of the room faded as she approached the keys, and for a moment, she felt the weight of all the eyes on her. But then she sat down at the piano, closed her eyes, and placed her hands on the keys. She took a deep breath and began to play. The notes were tentative at first, the fingers of her aging hands moving slowly across the keys. But as the music flowed, something magical happened. The nerves began to fade, and the familiar sense of peace filled her heart. The music began to tell a story that only she could tell, and it was beautiful. The room grew quiet, and all who were listening became mesmerized by the sound. Sister Agnes didn't play for long, just a few minutes. But in that brief time, she shared something of herself with the world. It was not for fame, not for recognition, but simply because it was a part of who she was. And in that moment, it was enough. The night of the gala had finally arrived. The small convent, which usually stood in quiet solitude, was now buzzing with excitement. Guests from all over the town had gathered, dressed in their finest clothes, eager to enjoy an evening of good food, music, and conversation. It was the convent's most important event of the year, one that would hopefully raise enough money to restore the building and fund the charitable work the nuns had always done in the community. Sister Agnes had quietly hoped that her music could contribute to this cause, bringing something special to the evening. However, she had never imagined the twists and turns the night would take. As the evening began, everything seemed to go smoothly. The guests mingled and exchanged pleasantries, enjoying the carefully prepared meals and the elegant decorations that filled the hall. There was laughter and light chatter, but as the night wore on, the mood began to shift. Slowly, the energy of the room started to dip. The main program had finished, and for a few moments there was an uncomfortable lull. Guests, not knowing what to do with the sudden quiet, looked around at each other, unsure of how to fill the gap in the evening's entertainment. The event coordinator, a younger nun who had helped organize everything, glanced nervously around the room. She had been the one who suggested to Sister Agnes that she play the piano during the gala, knowing how much her music could bring to the event. But with the Mother Superior's refusal, she knew that the plan was off. She had quietly hoped that Sister Agnes would still play, even if it was just for a brief moment. The guests would love it, she was sure of it. Yet now, with the energy in the room fading, she began to realize that something had to be done to save the night. She looked over at Sister Agnes, who was busy serving guests, greeting them with her usual warmth. There was a quiet sadness inning away, refusing to make waves. But then something inside her stirred. Could this one small act of defiance bring something beautiful to the evening? Could the music touch the hearts of others? Just for a moment? Sister Agnes asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The younger nun nodded eagerly. Just for a moment. You don't have to play long, but I know it will make a difference. Sister Agnes paused, her heart beating a little faster. She felt a rush of emotions, nervousness, excitement, and even a bit of fear. But she also felt something else, something deeper. She remembered the times when music had made her feel connected to something greater than herself. She remembered the peace it had always brought her, how it felt like a conversation with the divine, a moment when she was truly alive. Maybe just this once it would be okay to share that part of herself. With a quiet nod, Sister Agnes agreed. She didn't want to disappoint anyone, especially not the younger nun who had been so kind and persistent. Slowly, she made her way to the grand piano that sat in the corner of the room, an elegant instrument that had been tucked away, almost forgotten. The guests were busy talking, not yet aware of the surprise that was about to unfold. The room was filled with the soft murmur of voices, and the music that had been absent for much of the evening felt like a distant memory. Sister Agnes sat down at the piano, her fingers trembling slightly as they brushed over the cool keys. For a moment she closed her eyes, allowing the room to fade away. The weight of the moment pressed on her. She was stepping out of her comfort zone, choosing to share something deeply personal with a room full of strangers. It was a feeling unlike any she had ever experienced. The silence that hung in the air seemed to stretch on for what felt like an eternity. And then, without thinking, Sister Agnes let her fingers fall onto the keys. The sound of the first note was soft, tentative, as if she were unsure of herself. But as her fingers continued to move, the music began to take on a life of its own. Slowly at first, but with increasing confidence, she played. The melody flowed from her fingertips, sweet and clear, as if the piano itself were alive with the music. The room, which had been filled with idle chatter and clinking glasses, suddenly grew still. The guests fell silent, each person captivated by the unexpected beauty that filled the room. No one had expected such a powerful performance from an elderly nun who had been so quiet and reserved for so many years. The music was soft at first, a gentle introduction, but as Sister Agnes's hands moved faster, the notes began to soar, becoming fuller, richer. It was as though she was speaking through the music, telling a story that words could not express. The guests watched in awe, some of them with tears in their eyes, others simply struck dumb with amazement. Sister Agnes's hands danced over the keys with a grace and skill that seemed beyond her years. The music filled every corner of the room, wrapping itself around the guests like a warm embrace. The performance was not just a display of technical skill. It was a window into her soul, a glimpse of the life she had lived, the love she had given, and the peace she had found in her music. For the first time that evening, the energy in the room shifted. The guests were no longer just talking. They were listening, fully engaged in the music. Some leaned in closer, not wanting to miss a single note. Others simply closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, feeling its power in ways they had never imagined. The room, once filled with the sounds of polite conversation, was now filled with the sound of something far more profound. Sister Agnes, lost in the music, played as if she had forgotten everything around her. She was no longer an elderly nun at a fundraising event. She was simply a woman who loved music, a woman who had spent her life quietly giving to others, now allowing herself to take a moment for herself. The piano became her voice, her expression, her way of connecting with the world in a way she had never done before. As the final notes of the song played out, the room remained silent for a moment. It was as though no one wanted to break the spell the music had cast. Then, one by one, the guests began to clap. It started softly, almost unsure, but soon it grew into a loud and enthusiastic applause. Sister Agnes, startled by the reaction, opened her eyes. She hadn't expected such a response. She had played simply because she had wanted to share something beautiful. But now she was being met with admiration, even awe. She smiled quietly, humbled by the response, but deep down, she felt a sense of joy that she had not experienced in a long time. For a moment, she had let go of her fears, her doubts, and simply allowed herself to play. And in doing so, she had touched the hearts of everyone in that room. It was a gift she had given without expectation, but the result was more than she could have ever imagined. As the final note of Sister Agnes's performance echoed in the room, a strange silence followed. For a moment, the air felt thick, like everyone was holding their breath, unsure of how to react. Then just as quickly, the room came alive. Applause broke out, echoing across the hall. It started slowly at first, a few people clapping politely, unsure if they should express the emotions that had suddenly risen within them. But as the moments passed, the applause grew louder, more enthusiastic. Some guests even stood up, moved by the raw emotion that had poured from Sister Agnes's fingers. Sister Agnes was taken aback. She had played for herself, not for recognition, not for praise. The music had been her offering, her gift, and she had hoped it might bring some joy to those in the room. But the overwhelming reaction took her by surprise. Her heart swelled with warmth, but also with a gentle sadness. She had never sought attention, never wanted to be in the spotlight. She had always been content in the quiet corners of the convent, far from the world's gaze. But now the eyes of the room were on her, and she wasn't sure how to handle it. As she stood up from the piano, the room continued to applaud. She smiled shyly, nodding her head in gratitude, but she could feel the weight of the moment. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, and this unexpected outpouring of appreciation left her feeling a little vulnerable. She hadn't played for praise. She hadn't even played for the purpose of impressing anyone. Her fingers had simply moved across the keys because it was the one thing she could do, her way of connecting with something deeper than herself. The younger nun who had encouraged her to play approached Sister Agnes, her face beaming with excitement. "That was amazing, sister. You were incredible," she said, her voice full of admiration. "I knew you had it in you." Sister Agnes smiled but shook her head softly. "It wasn't anything special," she replied, her voice quiet as if she wanted to downplay the whole thing. "I was just playing from the heart," but the younger nun wouldn't hear it. "Everyone here was moved, sister. Your music touched them. It was so beautiful, so pure. You've given us a gift tonight." Sister Agnes, who had always shied away from praise, felt a flush of warmth in her cheeks. She wanted to deflect the attention, to return to her usual quiet role in the background. But the energy in the room was undeniable. The music had affected people in a way she hadn't expected. It wasn't just the skill of the performance that had impressed them, but the emotion, the depth of feeling that had come through in every note. As the night wore on, the guests began to speak in hushed tones about the performance. Some commented on how they had never known that Sister Agnes could play the piano so beautifully, while others spoke of how the music had stirred something deep inside them. Some said it felt like the music had connected them to something greater, something beyond the event itself. The atmosphere in the room had shifted from casual chatter to quiet reflection. The music had become the centerpiece of the evening, eclipsing everything else. And yet Sister Agnes remained unaware of just how profound her performance had been. While the applause died down, the guests continued to linger, discussing the unexpected moment. The evening had been full of surprises, and this was the one that would be remembered. People began to approach Sister Agnes one by one, offering their praise and admiration. Some even asked if she would consider playing at future events, their voices full of wonder and excitement. But Sister Agnes, always humble, simply nodded politely, offering a soft smile in return. She wasn't used to being the focus of such attention, and though she appreciated their kind words, she felt a tinge of discomfort. It wasn't that she didn't enjoy the appreciation. It was simply that she had never expected to receive it. She had never played for fame or recognition. Her music had always been for herself, for the moments when she could find peace in the notes, when she could connect with something deeper than herself. As the evening continued, The younger nun who had first encouraged Sister Agnes to play stayed close by her side, beaming with pride. "You were incredible, sister," she said once more. "You've inspired everyone here." Sister Agnes looked around the room, her gaze soft. She hadn't meant to inspire anyone. She hadn't meant to do anything at all except share a part of herself. But the reaction from the guests was undeniable. She could see it in their eyes, in the way they had been moved by the music. Perhaps for the first time in a long while her gift had reached others. Perhaps this had been her way of connecting, not just with the divine, but with the people around her in a way that words could not. As the night drew to a close, Sister Agnes felt a mix of emotions. There was satisfaction in knowing that the event had been a success, that the convent had raised the money it needed for its repairs. There was also a quiet sense of joy in the fact that her music had brought something special to the evening. She had played not for recognition, but for the simple pleasure of sharing her talent. And in doing so, she had unknowingly given the guests something they would remember for a long time. The Mother Superior, who had initially been opposed to the idea of Sister Agnes playing, approached her later in the evening. Her expression was one of quiet pride, though she said little at first. After a moment of silence, she placed a gentle hand on Sister Agnes's shoulder. "You did well, sister," she said, her voice soft. "I didn't expect that." Sister Agnes smiled, her eyes filled with humility. "It was just a small offering," she replied, almost as if trying to downplay the significance of the performance. "I'm glad it brought some joy." The Mother Superior gave a small nod. "Your music touched many tonight, sister. Perhaps there is more to your talents than you've allowed yourself to believe." Sister Agnes didn't respond immediately. She was still processing the events of the evening, still reflecting on the unexpected turn of events. She had never sought recognition, never imagined that her music could have such an impact. And yet here she was, the center of attention, praised for something she had once considered a quiet, personal part of herself. The guests began to depart, slowly filing out of the hall, their conversation still lingering in the air. Many of them made a point to thank Sister Agnes personally, expressing their appreciation for her performance. Some even mentioned how it had changed their perspective on the evening. What had started as a simple fundraising event had turned into something far more meaningful, something that would stay with them long after they left the convent. Sister Agnes, still humbled by the attention, quietly thanked them, her heart full of gratitude. As the last of the guests left, the younger nun who had encouraged Sister Agnes to play walked up to her once more. "Thank you, sister," she said. "You've made this night unforgettable. I knew you had it in you." Sister Agnes smiled softly. "I didn't do it for the applause," she said quietly. "I did it because it was a part of me, something I wanted to share. But I am grateful for your encouragement. Without it, I would never have played." The younger nun placed a gentle hand on her arm. "You've given us all something beautiful. And I think you've reminded us all that there is more to life than we sometimes realize. Your music touched our souls tonight." Sister Agnes looked around the room, now empty and quiet. The piano sat there silent and still, as if waiting for her to play once more. She didn't know if she would ever perform again, but in that moment she realized that her music had done something she hadn't expected. It had connected her to the people around her. It had brought them closer, not just to her, but to something greater, something pure. And perhaps, she thought with a soft smile, that was enough. As the first notes of Sister Agnes's music filled the room, something shifted in the air. The chatter of the guests faded, and all eyes turned toward the elderly nun sitting at the piano. She looked so unassuming, so small in her simple habit that no one could have imagined the brilliance about to unfold. Her fingers, though thin and marked by age, moved across the keys with a precision that seemed almost impossible. The melody was gentle at first, delicate like a whisper, but it quickly gained depth, weaving a tapestry of sound that captivated everyone in the room. It was not just her skill that held the guests' attention, it was the feeling behind every note. There was a warmth, a quiet strength, a life lived with dedication and love shining through in the music. Each chord seemed to tell a story, of hardships faced, of patience tested, of quiet moments of joy, of a heart that had always loved without asking for anything in return. People found themselves holding their breath, caught in the spell of the music, unable to tear their eyes away. Some of the younger guests leaned forward, astonished that such a small, humble woman could produce such powerful sound. The elderly guests closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them like a comforting tide, stirring memories long forgotten. As Sister Agnes continued, the music grew bolder, richer, more confident. It was as if the piano had become an extension of her soul, her fingers dancing over the keys as she poured every ounce of emotion into the performance. The guests could feel her passion, her sincerity, her humility, all blended into the rhythm and the harmony. Some guests were moved to tears, wiping their eyes quietly so as not to disrupt the others. Others sat in stunned silence, simply absorbing the beauty that seemed almost impossible to believe. Every note, every pause, every delicate touch spoke of a lifetime of devotion and quiet reflection. At first, some guests had doubted that an elderly nun could perform in such a way. They had seen her as fragile, gentle, perhaps too timid to step into the spotlight. But now, as her fingers glided effortlessly across the keys, all those assumptions vanished. The room was filled with awe and admiration. People whispered to one another, marveling at how someone so modest, so reserved could reveal such hidden talent. Some could not believe that the same woman, who had greeted them at the door with a soft smile, was capable of producing such breathtaking music. Even those who had initially been skeptical found themselves transformed. They had come to the gala expecting a pleasant evening of small performances and polite conversation. Instead, they were witnessing something extraordinary. The music seemed to fill the room in a way that went beyond entertainment. It reached into the hearts of the listeners, touching their deepest emotions, connecting them to something greater than themselves. Many guests felt a sense of peace, a gentle reminder of beauty in a world that often seemed rushed and chaotic. The music had become a bridge, linking the simplicity of Sister Agnes's life to the complex lives of the people around her. Sister Agnes played with a combination of grace and intensity that left the audience spellbound. Her hands moved with a fluidity that made it seem as though she had been born to play. The years of practice, the quiet dedication, the moments spent alone in the convent with only the piano and her thoughts, had all come together in this one perfect performance. The energy in the room shifted with each chord. There was a sense of reverence, of respect, of wonder, as the guests realized they were witnessing something truly special. The younger nun who had encouraged Sister Agnes to play watched with pride and amazement. She had known the potential was there, but seeing it come alive in the room was more than she had imagined. She could see the effect on the guests, their awe, their tears, their smiles, and she felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had helped this moment happen, and now she understood the power of believing in someone else, of encouraging them to share their gift. Sister Agnes, meanwhile, seemed unaware of the growing admiration around her. She was lost in the music, absorbed completely in the moment. Her mind and heart were focused only on the melody, on the feeling she was expressing, on the beauty she was creating. The performance was not long, but it was enough to leave a lasting impression. When the final notes faded into the air, there was a pause, a quiet moment where no one moved, no one spoke. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath, savoring the lingering emotions. And then slowly, applause began. At first it was a gentle clapping, hesitant, almost shy. But soon it grew louder, more enthusiastic, until the entire hall was filled with the sound of hands clapping, cheers, and murmurs of admiration. Guests stood up, some wiping tears from their eyes, all moved in a way they had not expected. Sister Agnes looked up from the piano, surprised by the overwhelming response. She had played because it felt right, not because she wanted recognition. The attention, the applause, the awe. It was all new to her, and she didn't quite know how to handle it. Yet even in her surprise, a quiet joy filled her heart. She realized that by sharing her music, she had connected with others in a way she had never imagined possible. The room that had once been just a place for a fundraising gala had been transformed into a space of wonder, of emotional connection, of shared humanity. As the applause continued, people began approaching her one by one, expressing their admiration. Some spoke softly, telling her how moved they had been, how the music had touched something deep inside them. Others asked if she would consider playing again at future events, eager to witness the magic once more. Sister Agnes listened with a mixture of humility and quiet delight. She was not used to receiving such attention, but she accepted it with grace, grateful that her music had made a difference. Even the Mother Superior, who had initially opposed the idea of Sister Agnes performing, was struck. She approached the piano quietly, her expression a mix of pride and astonishment. "I didn't know," she said softly. "I had no idea you could play like this." Sister Agnes looked at her, smiling gently. "I only ever played for myself for the quiet moments," she replied. "I didn't mean to do anything more." The Mother Superior nodded, her eyes reflecting a new understanding. "Tonight you did more than anyone could have imagined," she said. "You've touched all of us in ways words cannot describe." Sister Agnes felt a deep warmth in her chest, a quiet affirmation that her music had reached beyond the confines of her own life, beyond the walls of the convent. She had shared a piece of herself and in doing so had left an imprint on everyone present. The rest of the evening continued, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Guests who had been focused on the social aspect of the gala were now talking about the music, about the power of art, about the beauty of a life lived with quiet dedication. The conversation shifted from small talk to reflection, from pleasantries to meaningful connection. Sister Agnes, who had always been content in her quiet role, found herself at the center of a shared experience that transcended the ordinary. By the end of the night, it was clear that Sister Agnes's performance had become the highlight of the evening. People would talk about it for weeks, recounting the story of the elderly nun who had played the piano with such depth, with such feeling, that she had moved an entire room. Her talent, hidden for so long, had finally been revealed, and it had left an unforgettable mark on everyone who had heard it. Sister Agnes, meanwhile, remained humble, quietly grateful for the opportunity to share her gift. She had never played for fame, never sought admiration, and yet, through her music, she had connected with others in a way she had never thought possible. In that moment, she understood that her life, her dedication, her quiet love of music had a purpose far beyond what she had imagined. Her gift had touched hearts, inspired wonder, and reminded everyone that true beauty often comes from the most unexpected places. And as the night drew to a close, as guests left with smiles and gratitude in their hearts, Sister Agnes felt a quiet peace settle over her. She had shared something precious, and in doing so, she had left the world just a little brighter, a little more filled with hope, and a little more in awe of the power of simple, honest talent. After the gala ended, the convent slowly returned to its usual quiet routine, but things were no longer quite the same. The story of Sister Agnes's piano performance had spread like wildfire among the guests and the local community. People spoke of the elderly nun who had astonished everyone with her talent, of how her music had touched their hearts in ways they could hardly describe. Sister Agnes, however, returned to her normal life as if nothing extraordinary had happened. She was a humble woman, more comfortable with silence than with applause, and she preferred it that way. Yet even in her quiet, there was a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced before. The Mother Superior, who had once blocked Sister Agnes from playing, now regarded her with a newfound respect. There had been no need for words or grand gestures. The performance itself spoke volumes. She had seen, as everyone else had, the power and beauty of Sister Agnes's music. For the first time, she acknowledged openly that perhaps there were talents among the sisters that had been underestimated, hidden by modesty and years of devotion. Quietly, she encouraged Sister Agnes to continue playing, not for attention or recognition, but as a way to share joy and inspiration with others. News of the performance didn't stay confined to the convent or even the town. Guests returned home, recounting the evening to friends and family. The story made its way to newspapers, local radio stations, and eventually social media. People were fascinated by the idea that such a humble, devoted nun could hold such incredible talent. Invitations began to arrive, requests for Sister Agnes to perform at community events, local fundraisers, and even charity functions in nearby towns. It was overwhelming, though most of these invitations she declined. She was a nun first and foremost, committed to her vows and to the quiet life she had chosen. Yet there were moments when she realized her music could have a purpose beyond the convent. A few weeks after the gala, a local children's hospital reached out asking if she could play for the patients. At first she hesitated. She was not used to performing publicly, and the thought of being in the spotlight again made her nervous. But when she thought about the sick children who might find comfort or joy in her music, she felt a sense of calling. Perhaps this was a way her talent could serve others, in keeping with the life of service she had always embraced. When she arrived at the hospital, Sister Agnes felt the familiar mix of nerves and excitement. The children were shy at first, some hiding behind their parents, some confined to beds too weak to move much. She approached the piano, which had been set up in a small recreation room, and began to play. At first her music was gentle, soothing, like a warm hug that wrapped around everyone present. Slowly she noticed the children relaxing, their eyes widening as the melody touched them. Some began to smile. Others softly tapped their hands or hummed along. Even the parents and nurses seemed moved, many whispering to each other about the beauty of the music. It was in moments like these that Sister Agnes understood the true impact of her gift. Her music was more than notes on a piano. It was a form of connection, a bridge between hearts. She could reach people in ways that words could never do. She could bring comfort to those in pain, hope to those who felt despair, and joy to those who had little reason to smile. Each note she played carried not just her skill, but her compassion, her dedication, and the quiet wisdom of a life spent serving others. Word of her hospital performances spread, and soon she found herself invited to schools, community centers, and small events that sought a touch of inspiration. Sister Agnes always chose carefully, performing only when she felt her music could make a real difference. She never sought fame, never wanted recognition. For her, the reward was in the smiles, the tears of gratitude, and the quiet moments when someone whispered, "Thank you for sharing your music." Despite the growing attention, life at the convent remained grounded in its routine. Sister Agnes continued her daily prayers, her chores, and her care for the other sisters. She never allowed the admiration she received to change her, never let it distract from the humility that defined her. Yet in quiet moments she would sit at the piano, reflecting on how far her music had reached. She had once believed that her talent was meant only for private enjoyment, a hidden part of herself. Now she realized that it was a gift meant to be shared, a way to touch lives beyond the walls of the convent. The community, too, began to see the convent in a new light. People came not just to admire the sisters' dedication to their faith and charity, but also to experience the quiet beauty that Sister Agnes's music brought. Donations increased, and the convent began to thrive in ways that had seemed impossible before. Guests would often linger, hoping to hear even a few notes of the piano, and Sister Agnes's performances became a symbol of the unexpected joy that could be found in life's simplest and most humble places. Through it all, Sister Agnes remained true to herself. She never sought the spotlight, never let fame alter her nature, and never allowed her performances to overshadow the work of the convent. But she did come to understand the profound effect that sharing one's gift could have. She had spent a lifetime quietly giving, and now she had found a way to give in a different, more personal way, through her music, through the expression of her soul. Even the Mother Superior, once cautious and wary of public displays, grew to appreciate the impact of Sister Agnes's performances. She saw how the music inspired generosity, compassion, and joy, not only in the guests but in the wider community. She encouraged the other sisters to recognize their own hidden talents, understanding that sometimes the most profound contributions came from sharing one's unique gifts with the world. Sister Agnes had unknowingly led the way, showing that humility and talent could coexist, and that true beauty often came from the most unexpected sources. As the years passed, Sister Agnes continued to play, always quietly, always with purpose. She never sought recognition, never performed for applause alone, but she understood the ripple effect of her music. People remembered her not just for her skill, but for the warmth and sincerity she brought with each note. Children who had heard her play in the hospital grew up recalling the gentle,